Good morning. My name is Carol Rosin. In 1974, after being a sixth grade school teacher, I was introduced to the late Dr. Wernher von Braun, in the U.S., the father of rocketry. In my first meeting with him, during that first 3.5 hours, he said to me, "Carol, you will stop the weaponization of space." And I said, teachers don't stop until June. He said, "No, you have to understand. This is February. And we have to prevent the weaponization of space because there is a lie being told to everyone that the weaponization of space is now first being based upon the evil empire, the Russians. There are many enemies," he said, "against whom we're going to build this space-based weapon system. The first of whom was the Russians, which was existing at that time. Then there would be terrorists. Then there would be third world countries. Now we call them rogue nations or nations of concern. Then there would be asteroids." And then he would repeat to me over and over, "And the last card, the last card, the last card would be the extraterrestrial threat." Well, at the time, I kind of laughed when he said asteroids, and when he said extraterrestrials, I knew I wasn't going to deal with that subject. And now we hear on the news just today, this week, that they've slid in another enemy. Only this time we're going to protect our satellites. In other words, we have to have some reason to spend these trillions, to waste these dollars on a space-based weapon system, and they're all lies. This is a system, he told me, that would never protect anyone. Even back then, he talked about suitcase bombs. He talked about chemical, viral, bacterial, biological warfare, that these space-based weapons would never protect us against. And then he told me that, in fact, if you travel around the world, which I did after he died in 1977, I met with people in over 100 countries who were friends. They didn't want to build space-based weapons. I became a space and missile defense consultant. And I worked with people around the world. I became an advisor to the People's Republic of China. They don't want to build a space-based weapon system. And he told me back then that they didn't. He said, "Go to Russia. They're considered to be the enemy." I got on a plane by myself. When I got to Russia, I had a list of people that I had read out of the newspaper. Chernenko was in office then. He was the only one I didn't get a chance to meet. They introduced me to everyone when I got there. And when I got back, I said, "Oh my Lord, this man is telling the truth. There is no threat." And I've been waiting until this day for 27 years, and I'm expecting the spin to happen, because he also explained to me that as a military strategist, as a person who worked on the MX missile, which I did later, he said, "You will find that there is going to be a spin to find some enemy against whom we have to build space-based weapons." And now we should expect the spin, because he said part of the formula for the intelligence community is if they might have a weapon, then we have to consider that they do have these weapons. So now they do have these weapons, so now we have to build these weapon systems. And that's the formula, except that it's all based on a lie. And we have witnesses here who have told you that they can shut down our missile silos. They can stop a rocket going into space that's a test. We have witnesses here who have worked in the classified departments, who have the courage to come forward here to support what Wernher von Braun told me back in 1974 to 77. And I will testify before the Congress that when I founded the Institute for Security and Cooperation in Outer Space, which I shut down a few years ago because I didn't believe we had a chance with this huge, integrated around the world, complex weapon system, that we had any chance at all of transforming that war industry into a space industry that could provide benefits, like Dr. Greer has said, of global warming. We can end that situation of that problem. We can end the energy crisis. We can build now non-polluting technologies. Wernher von Braun used to tell me that we could have cars back then that drove around off the ground. He described this to me on beams so that we have no pollution on this planet. And we can solve the problems of the people that are urgent and potential, and the other animals and the other cultures on Earth and in space. And we can end the arms race without dislocating the industry jobs, without disrupting the economy, by transforming, Wernher von Braun told me, the war industry into a global cooperative space industry that will provide, he said, Finally, more jobs and profits on this planet than during any hot or cold wartime, more products and services that can be applied directly to solving the problems of this planet, and we can have a whole planet now that lives in peace on Earth, with all the cultures on Earth, and with all the extraterrestrial cultures in space. And these are words that Wernher von Braun told me in 1974, and I will testify before the Congress under oath about everything I have said and more. Thank you.
This article was published in March of 2019, and we know that Donald Trump made the Space Force official on December 21st of 2019, so about 9 months after this article was published. And we see the type of weaponry that they're going to have at their disposal, such as the rods of God, the tungsten rods, meteorites, molten metal cannons, and weaponized asteroids. And what have we been talking about lately? We've been revealing that they could possibly pull off a fake asteroid event by dropping nukes instead. And we know about the rods from God, the 20-foot telephone pole-sized tungsten rods that they can shoot down towards Earth, and it's gravity pulling it down. And then we have molten metal cannons, which are weapons that will be used against other nations' space weapons. Then we have the weaponizing the asteroids, and it says this sounds far-fetched, but soon it may be technically possible for a major space power to deflect an asteroid onto its enemy. Already, NASA experts have developed a technology called HAMMER that they hope could nudge rocks before they smash into Earth. This would be done by strategically targeting nuclear missiles into the rocks until it knocks them off course. But experts point out there is nothing to stop a power steering an asteroid towards its enemy. There are 18,000 asteroids whose orbit occasionally brings them close to the Earth. Then we have Space War Command and Control. Lieutenant Colonel Jeremy Rayleigh said it has two goals. He said the first one is to create a more effective human decision maker in respect to space battle management, command, and control. In other words, to get information into a human being's head so they can make a decision about a military situation that has escalated in space. Then we have moon bases. And then we have Big Brother in the sky, DARPA's attempt to be able to have complete coverage of the Earth and its orbit. Then we have Space Force ships, rogue satellites, the Excalibur laser gun. Lasers and high-powered microwave gun systems could be fitted to spacecraft or satellite because they have the range. The U.S. is running a laser gun program called Excalibur. It uses electricity to emit lasers which can concentrate devastating energy rays on their targets.
Space. Going to be a lot of things happening in space. Because space is the world's newest warfighting domain. Amid grave threats to our national security, American superiority in space is absolutely vital. And we're leading, but we're not leading by enough, but very shortly we'll be leading by a lot. The Space Force will help us deter aggression and control the ultimate high ground. With today's signing, I will proudly appoint General J. Raymond, the first Chief of Space Operations, and he will become the very first member of the Space Force, and he will be on the Joint Chiefs. He will be on the Joint Chiefs, which are now expanding by one position. That's a very powerful position. So, General Raymond, congratulations, and thank you for everything you've done. We've worked very hard on this, and it's so important from a defensive standpoint, from an offensive standpoint, from every standpoint there is.
Let me just say it's a very historic moment. The United States has been a spacefaring nation for decades, but we know that our adversaries in the last several years have weaponized space. They've made it a war-fighting domain. And so with the establishment of Space Force and the establishment of Space Command, the United States is now doing what it needs to do to protect our assets in space and to ensure that space remains the heavens by which we not only protect America, but we sustain our economy, we sustain our commercial capabilities, we sustain Americans' way of life.
Very, very great honor. It's a great honor. That's a beautiful flag, too. Roger, hold that up so they can see. That's really beautiful. Wow. That's a big day. That's a big day.
Can somebody explain the logo?
General Raymond?
So the delta in the middle is a symbol that the space community has used for years and years and years. The North Star signifies our core value, our guiding light, if you will. And the orbit around the globe signifies the space capabilities that fuel our American way of life and our American way of war.
That's great. I'm going to do this for Roger. Here, Roger. Please don't put this on eBay tonight.
You care to join us, Mr. Gilman?
Yeah, that's right. Thank you. Well, I understand I have until midnight. Your name is Trump?
Dr. Walter Trump.
All of the incredible medical professionals, the doctors, the nurses, everybody, at Walter Reed Medical Center.
Now, Trump has been treated at the Walter Reed Medical Center. Now, this television program was made in 1958, and it's about the end of the world, and it has a character called Walter Trump, Dr. Walter Trump, who's some kind of magician who predicts the end of the world. Now watch this.
Well, how do you figure that the world is going to end?
Well, that's really quite simple. According to my calculations, tonight, November 14th, the Earth will either collide with or come into close proximity to a comet. In any event, the outcome will be disaster. A cosmic explosion will end all. But the end may come by other means.
Now, how do you see it?
By means of this. Uncounted millions of these. This is a meteorite. Iron ore from out of space. They will rain on the Earth like pepper on an egg. Each one red hot, traveling at speeds in excess of millions of miles an hour. Molded by their passage into unstoppable bullets.
But you can stop them, huh?
I can, sir. And I will. See, they are drawn to the Earth by a force that we call gravity. I have discovered how to repel that force. By doing that, I can save this town.
Well, how?
By means of a force repeller.
You sell these force repellers?
You have a very suspicious mind.
So there you have it. In this television program made in 1958, where it has a character called Dr. Walter Trump, he says that the world will be hit by meteorites, fragments of a comet. Now in the film Deep Impact, again you have the same theme, that fragments of a comet hit the Earth. In the film Greenland 2020, you also have the same theme. In the Illuminati game cards, you have the Meteor Strike card. So in the Illuminati game cards, you have the Meteor Strike card. Now, these Illuminati game cards have predicted event after event, and we've had lots of predictive programming, as you can see in that program made in 1958, that meteorites were going to hit the Earth, and you have a character called Dr. Walter Trump, and Trump has been treated at the Walter Reed Military Medical Center. Now, during the coronavirus lockdown, it was announced a large comet called Comet Atlas was coming towards the Earth. Then between March and April, it started fragmenting into many different parts. The fragments of a comet if they were to hit the Earth would be called meteors or meteorites. So is the coronavirus lockdown about preparation for this event, as they would need time to prepare for it? And so, as you can see, that End of the World TV program was made in 1958. Now if we go to this, back to this guy's channel called Wake Up, he noticed, now I made a video where last month in September where Mars, the planet Mars, was very close to the Moon. Now 2 days ago the same event occurred again, and this guy filmed it.
Hi guys, just coming here one more time because I have to sound the alarm. I just noticed something very interesting. Do you remember our demonic cartoon from 2012, I believe? A Heliofan cartoon.
So he's talking about I Pet Goat. I Pet Goat 2 is made by Heliofant.
I Pet Goat 2. So check out this. This is the sign how they write Heliofant, and this is a photo that I've done 10:37 Eastern.
So 2 days ago you had the Moon and you had Mars right next to the Moon. Unfortunately in England it's been raining a lot, so we couldn't see it. But last month the same thing happened. But 2 days ago it was even brighter, but we couldn't see it from England, okay? So I actually did a video last month showing you it. Now it looks remarkably similar, the position of Mars to the Moon, to the Heliofant title in the film I Pet Goat 2, which also has meteorites and predicts the end of the world. So it looks like the event is coming closer, and if you watch this film it actually says November the 14th. Okay, this magazine called The Economist, which is owned by the Rothschilds, and they had a cover called The Next Catastrophe. Let's have a look at it. Now here we have the cover, and you have a clock in the shape of an all-seeing eye. The clock represents Saturn, the god of time. You have the coronavirus here. You have a nuclear explosion here, similar to the Beirut explosion. You have a solar mass ejection. You have global warming, you have volcano, and you have a pig swine flu. Now here you actually have an asteroid or a fragment of a comet going towards the Earth. And the Rothschilds have released several other Economist covers which show an asteroid or a comet coming towards the Earth. And so in this magazine called The Next Catastrophe and How to Survive It, they show an asteroid or a comet or a fragment of one called a meteorite or meteor coming towards the Earth. We have the Illuminati game cards with the Meteor Strike card. So the Illuminati games cards have predicted event after event. Now listen to this speech by Boris Johnson and listen to the coded message he gives. So he's going to give a coded message on, and just listen to it here.
But because after 12 years of relative anemia, we need to lift the trend rate of growth. We need to lift people's incomes, not just go back to where we were. And it's clear from COVID that we need the economic robustness to deal with whatever the next cosmic spanner may be hurtling towards us in the dark. And
did you hear that? We have to deal with the next catastrophe, which is a cosmic spanner hurtling towards us in the dark. Cosmic means space. and of course a meteorite hurtles towards the Earth. So in my videos I've shown how there has been lots of predictive programming on films like Deep Impact, Greenland 2020, and in the media that an asteroid or fragments of a comet are going to hit the Earth. And here we have Boris Johnson given a hidden code that the next catastrophe will be something cosmic. Listen to this.
People's incomes, not just go back to where we were. And it's clear from COVID that we need the economic robustness to deal with whatever the next cosmic spanner may be hurtling towards us in the dark. And the only way to ensure true resilience and long-term prosperity is to raise the overall productivity.
There you go.
The world of tomorrow and the instruments of science which are shaping it may seem remote and fantastic, but yesterday's fantasies are becoming today's facts. How will these great advances influence and benefit our personal lives? Here in this film is an answer. Sweeping through an eternal vacuum, through blazing heat and bitter cold, exposed to mysterious radiation, man-made satellites circle the Earth. Traveling at fantastic speeds, these eyes in outer space give us knowledge for future exploration, and also vital information that will lead to a better understanding of one of nature's great forces, the weather. With awesome violence and destruction, the weather is one of man's oldest and mightiest adversaries. But in its ever-changing moods, the weather brings us beauty. The weather gives us our daily bread. The weather makes possible all living things. And the weather certainly influences our daily lives. Yes, we have always been at the mercy of weather. When the weather is nice, we are happy. If the weather is hot and muggy, we tend to be frustrated, irritable, and even criminal. But if the fog rolls in, we are apt to be depressed. Thunderstorms cause fear and apprehension. Icy winds and snow seem to slow us down. In trying to predict these capricious changes in weather, we sometimes resort to rather questionable weather forecasting devices, such as an almanac, a crystal ball, a gouty leg, and the law of average. This is the master control room. Electronic maps and view screens display up-to-the-minute pictures of the weather around the Earth. Every hour, reports are automatically received from all points at sea, on land, and in the air. 22,000 miles out in space, 3 robot satellites train their sensitive television eyes on all parts of the Earth. These pictures are monitored on viewing screens in the Weather Center. Here in the computing room, electronic machines digest the constant flood of information received from all stations. This is then translated into an ever-changing diagram of the Earth's weather. Forecasts for every sector of the globe are made months in advance. Prediction charts have indicated that a powerful hurricane will begin forming today in the Atlantic Ocean. The electronic weather map shows an intense storm system building up about 1,000 miles due east of Miami, Florida. The controller calls for a close-up satellite view of the troubled area.
Coordinates. Coco 526, Yankee 2.5.
Okay, controller. Coco 526, Yankee 2.5.
The characteristic swirling clouds of the hurricane are beginning to form. At sea, the waves anticipate the violence to come. The controller calls for a last-minute prediction of the hurricane's path. If control measures are not begun at once, the hurricane will smash across densely populated areas within 48 hours.
11 a.m. EST. A hurricane is forming 960 miles east of Miami, Florida. If control measures are ineffective, it will pass inland at Cape Hatteras in 48 hours. Control operations will begin within 2 hours, but safety precautions should be completed from Cape Fear, north no later than 6 p.m. tomorrow.
At Weather Central, the control strategy is mapped out. A ridge of high pressure slants across the eastern United States between 2 low-pressure storm systems. If these 2 storm centers are intensified, the high will build up along the coast, forming a barrier that will turn the hurricane out to sea.
Stand by. Now pulling in satellite number 1 for visual check of low-pressure systems L20 and L21.
The operator brings the satellite into focus on the 2 storms. One centered over Kansas, the other over Labrador.
Changing the northeastern low, L21.
With a touch of a button, the battle begins. On the ground, chemical cloud seeders begin to work the 2 storm areas. Robot planes seed the clouds from above. The storm centers over Kansas and over Labrador intensify as seeding continues.
Now changing over to Hurricane Center H8.
The fury of the hurricane mounts as 100-mile-an-hour winds lash the sea to a foaming frenzy.
All stations, Sector C. Activate Phase 2, Control Plan Delta. Set vapor rockets for 42,000 feet. Execute.
As an emergency measure, the controller calls for a salvo of vapor rockets to be fired ahead of the path the hurricane is predicted to take. These artificial clouds will block the sun from evaporating more water to feed the hurricane. The reports coming into the control center indicate that the diversionary cloud seeding over Kansas is now creating a flood danger. Specially equipped robot aircraft are dispatched immediately to release a high concentration of cloud seeding material into the fringes of the storm. Heavier seeding from the ground also helps to subdue the rain by spreading it over a wider area. The controller calls for another view of the hurricane, which has now moved closer to the coast.
Signal out on number 1 satellite. 10-minute interruption for correction. Have you anything else in the area?
Satellite station S1 is approaching area. We'll make contact. S1, this is Weather Central. Request video signal at grid coordinates COCO.
An emergency situation has developed. In an orbiting space station 1,000 miles above the hurricane, a crewman sends a temporary picture back to Weather Central.
Okay, S1, your video is R5S5. Thank you.
The hurricane has stopped moving toward the coast, but is still intensifying. It must be made to move northward and out to sea. This is a crisis.
Aberdeen Station. Activate multiple seeding rockets on course 117.
The controller decides to fire cloud seeding rockets just ahead of the hurricane, hoping to start it moving. Slowly, the hurricane begins to shift. All available forces have been brought into play. Now we can only watch and wait. After hours of tension, the turning point is reached. Latest reports indicate the control strategy is successful. At last, the high-pressure ridge has settled along the coast, forming an invisible wall of safety. The storm is over. The danger has passed. The hurricane has been defeated, turned away from the land, and left to spend itself harmlessly far out at sea. In the world of tomorrow, weather control will enrich and safeguard our daily lives. In the foreseeable future, we will conquer more than violent storms. We will turn the destructive elements of today into new sources of power, shaping the land on which we live. All mankind will benefit. Arid wastelands will be made green and fertile, and vast frozen areas will become productive. To this end, man-made satellites will probe the secrets of the skies. They will be our eyes in outer space.
go over the name of this document and what you'll find and why you need to know about this information. Okay, it's the application of Tesla's technology in today's world. And it's the transmission of power without the use of cables or wires. It discusses mind control and weather control. And it was prepared and published by Lafferty Harwood Partners Limited in Montreal in January of 1978. And this is the report in the format in which we received it. And again, it will be posted on stopthecrime.net under our resource document tab. I've also requested a blast out of this document. I feel it's extremely significant in the sense to understand how long have we been controlled. And I've actually found documents on were we controlled, and those documents dated back to the 1940s. And in those documents, Steve, I was really stunned to find out that on days of heavy chemtrailing, there are more traffic accidents and there are more industrial injuries, people that are working on job sites on days of heavy chemtrailing. And that were we controlled by the author by the name of Lincoln. And that was back in the 1940s. So
Wow.
Now we have a document that we're discussing right now, January of 1976. And again, the application of Tesla's technology in today's world. I'm going to spend a little time in this because I found it to be important with the idea of mind control and what we all face and why you all must reduce the frequencies in your home environment as soon as possible. I guess that would be the takeaway from this information. Would you say that as well, Steve?
Absolutely. And, Deborah, as you mentioned Tesla, I know, maybe I should say secondhand, that the U.S. government has expounded so much on Tesla's technology in every field, every aspect. Of course, even as what you're saying that you've discovered in these documents as well. And that has been grilled into me through sources that I have, going into some very sinister areas that they have expounded on this technology. So it's really amazing, some of the things that's been shared with me. I don't know if I would share it all here, but I can concur with what you're saying. From these documents, I'm aware of those things and even deeper than that.
Well, Steve, that's disconcerting. I'm thinking that many people's brains are spinning by what they're hearing now. And I know that with 100 years advanced technologies, beyond our ability to even understand that is how far advanced those technologies are with cloning and many other aspects of life extension, that this really, when you think about it, is really rather, has been in effect for many decades, and it's not new. But I want to state a couple of things because I covered this a few years ago. I have family members that live in Central Oregon, and actually right outside of Grants Pass, or in Grants Pass near Medford, Oregon. Now, Medford, Oregon, and the communities south of Medford were caught up in the massive fires here the past few weeks. So with that having been said, I discovered back in the 70s, there was a massive spike of suicides in Medford, Oregon. And we discovered that researchers were using ultra-low frequencies. They call them ULF, ultra-low frequencies, that were being beamed into Medford, Oregon. And the concern was that they had come from a nearby military base just outside of Medford. But when the researchers arrived in Medford and they went to the base and they met with the commanding officer, they were told that the base knew about the ULF, and the base knew about it, but that his base was not responsible. They were told, the base, our U.S. base, told the investigators that the Russians were being allowed to beam Medford, Oregon, with the frequencies. Now, this is important to note because, well, I'm going to finish this up. They talked about how additional extremely low frequencies were also coming into the homes of the populace through their television antennas, which controlled some sort of standing wave resonance within the structure of the home itself. And many of these people were severely depressed, even if they did not watch television. So I'm going to throw this out right now for whatever it's worth. We recently discovered that we must ground our homes with a grounding rod. I would recommend that all of you seek out an electrician and discuss this, because what we discovered was that in the engineering of building our homes and building the foundations, that the grounding rods were put into the concrete pores of the footings of the foundations. That is not an adequate ground. That we need to have our homes grounded in the soil. So I'm throwing that out right now because this is likely a massive contributor to the dirty electricity that will kill you. Let me describe dirty electricity. Now again, these are things you can do yourself, things you can implement to reduce the frequencies in your homes, and things that I would suggest you do immediately. So what is dirty electricity? Well, it is electrical pollution, and it's not something, of course, that you'll see. You can't smell it. You can't taste it. Well, some people do. They have a bad taste in their mouth from an overload of frequencies. You can't touch it, and yet it has become the greatest polluting element in the Earth's environment. One of the greatest, I would say, polluting elements in the Earth's environment. Now, Dr. Sam Milham, M-I-L-H-A-M, is a scientist, and he's also a whistleblower. And he has discussed dirty electricity. And here's a quote that he says: "This is an industry cover-up of the toxic facts by electric utility companies, the cell phone industry, public utility commissions, state health departments, and the FDA." Discusses how, and you all need to understand that the basic frequency on the power lines of the electrical power delivered to your homes and other buildings has now been increased with an added higher frequency polluting electrical voltage and currents, delivering higher frequency power into the wiring and into the devices in your homes, offices, and into our schools. Children are getting very sick. People in office buildings also getting cancers and becoming very ill. Dirty electricity does not need a direct wire connection. It connects through the air, traveling into the human body from the wires that carry the power. And once in the human body, the high frequencies cause cancer and many other diseases. And this would include smart meters in your home and cell towers. You can do antennasearch.com or celltowersearch.com and find out where hidden cell towers are in your area. It also, cell phone chargers are a culprit for this. Hand-free phone handsets should not be used. You should have the connected curly-Q wire from your handset to your phone. Do not use hand-free phones. We've tested the EMF from hands-free phones, and it is just almost on par with the danger of cell phones. So the computers, you have to make sure your computers are hardwired. Even copiers are a few of the common sources of dirty electricity. And dirty electricity is damaging the entire human population. So we've discussed this. We've given you some ideas on what you can do to mitigate some of that. I'm going to add a few more things now. Do not sleep on wire box spring mattresses because the dirty electricity goes into all metal. If you're looking to have a teeth replacement, do not have the metal post. Those are all antennas in your mouth. Just like the amalgam fillings are dangerous They're antennas in your mouth. If you have amalgam fillings and you're feeling that pain when you bite a piece of aluminum foil, well, that's amalgam filling reaction. And you may want to consider having those removed as long as you are considering removing the other aspects of frequencies in your home. It is quite an expensive procedure, and you have to go to special dentists that are set up to remove amalgam fillings. So I can tell you that many of the effects of the pulsed microwave radiations, I'm going to go over a few of that now, and you can download our symptom list from stopthecrime.net and carry this around with you. I'm going to go over some of what is happening to all of us. Many of what you're going to hear me discuss is what the COVID symptoms are. I want to throw one more thing in right now. This just came into California right now, where we have been told in California that as various counties are considered to be some of the lockdowns loosened up and where some more of the businesses might be allowed to resume their businesses, it's now contingent upon the disadvantaged populations that their COVID spikes are on par with the rest of the area. They want equality. They want equity, even equity throughout all groups. So what is happening now here in our county? We have a large Hispanic community which has a higher COVID, presumably, a higher pandemic rate than the other areas. They're going to not allow the entire county to open until the Hispanic area is now reduced with COVID spikes. Now, I will tell you, the Hispanic communities and the lower income communities have been given free cell phones. They have been given lots of wireless technology from the telecommunication. Schools are given wireless technology. There are many cell phone towers. They're deploying 5G small cells in all the schools, along with all the smart meters that exist already. Many schools are so financially strapped that they have cell phone towers in their play yards with the schools. I have a friend whose son died in San Diego, California, as a result of having classes at the San Diego State next to an enormous cell phone tower. And his face was red, and they lived in Colorado, and the mom just thought that he was getting a nice sunburn from living in San Diego near the coast. No, he was being cooked by frequencies. He died about a year or so later after complaining to his mother and to his parents that he could not study any longer. He was just unable to concentrate. So what are some of the effects of some of these pulse microwave frequencies? We can get heartbeat rhythm disparities, sleep pattern disparities. We can become paranoid and have hallucinations and amnesia and illusions and drowsiness and absent of feelings. Now think about that. Absent of feelings. With absent of feelings, we're going to become more violent on the streets as we lose our humanity and our dignity. And we're going to have increased depression, which many people are now feeling with this entrapment of COVID and the forced lockdowns. Also with the frequencies, there will be suicidal feelings, visual distortion and confusion. I want to add under the visual distortion, the Department of Energy is a Rothschild international banker corporation and a business. It is the Department of Energy is requiring all of us to eliminate our original incandescent lights and move on into LED lights and more. These lights and other lights that are being now told to us that it reduces greenhouse gas emissions and reduces the impact to our planet is actually causing blindness and various types of eye diseases. So at this point, I would throw out the idea that while you are still able to go to an ophthalmologist and get prescription glasses that have blue tech lenses in it, do it. Why do I say while you are still able to go to an ophthalmologist? Very soon you will not be able to go to doctors and have appointments without having a COVID pass. So while we're still in that moment, we're recommending that people do as much as they can for themselves at this point. Also, the frequencies really prevent our ability to relax. We don't feel well, and we feel basically unhappy. People become more angry. We're seeing that. Manic behavior, problems with movement and flashes. Some people experience loss of appetite. People are having small seizures and disturbed orientation and auditory and visual hallucinations, and the inability to make decisions, and basically overall sensory organ problems such as sight, touch, and sound. Basic confusion, flickering, flashing of lights, drowsiness, mania and hyperactivity, and anxiety, and again, sleep disturbances. But let's talk about what these frequencies are also doing and how 5G and the 4G and all of the other Gs are jamming our mineral channels that we require. They're destroying our ability to take in oxygen. And so what is happening is by jamming our immune systems, these are some of the results of the electromagnetic attacks on our bodies. And again, it goes into many of the symptoms that I just discussed. But again, brain fog and sluggish thinking and difficulty concentrating and headaches and migraines. Again, vision disruption and eye problems, cataracts, eye pain, head or chest pain, even allergies, difficulty breathing, respiratory problems, slow reaction time. Now this you can print off on stopthecrime.net under symptoms. Just type in symptoms list and you will find this list. But what is also very important is it does create chronic fatigue, exhaustion, mood disorders. Even our pets get jumpy. And not to forget that every living thing on this planet is being affected by these frequencies and behavioral problems in children as well. We're seeing a lot of odd behavior in animals in the wild now, and certainly this all amounts to tremendous loss of overall productivity and loss of employment and unusual family conflicts. And so that is why we must understand what is happening to us within our family, in the homes, and reduce these frequencies, because it disturbs also the blood-brain barrier and allows toxins to enter into our brains. So also psychotronic weapons and mind weapons and mass mind control, controlling our thoughts and our emotions and directing our physical actions. Now, I know, Steve, that you've had conversations with government heads that talk about being able to control our thinking.
Yes, very true, Deborah. Back in 2015 was just one such example. And I had gone to Washington, D.C., was invited there and met very covertly with one of Obama's, well, let me just put it this way, someone that was frequently in his presence. And the discussion came up about Tunisia, and before Tunisia, we were discussing the black man that had set himself on fire in front of the Washington National Mall. And he said to me that skull-to-brain technology was being utilized, and that they had used that in Tunisia and were very successful in getting the people to protest and riot and turn that whole region upside down. And said, but what's strange is they said it's not working in America. And I'm like, you're kidding me. You're using skull-to-brain technology on U.S. soil? And he told me yes. He said they're trying to find a way to disarm this nation. And the only way they could figure to do it is to cause civil unrest, cause some sort of riot, in the nation, and they were using skull-to-brain technology to do exactly that. And which also brings me to a thought, Deborah, and that is one of the shootings that took place in Florida. The young man that was basically the fall guy made the statement he was hearing voices in his head. And that really caught my attention, especially in light of the fact that one of the teachers that witnessed the gunman, as the gunman shot the teacher across the hallway from her, spoke about how that she said she couldn't believe the police were shooting them. And we're not saying that the police were shooting them, but it was the way the man was dressed. And he was dressed nothing like what this young man that was accused of shooting this school up was dressed like. And so it's always been kind of stuck in the back of my mind about that type technology. And then, of course, recently I was told that is nothing compared to what they have now. That what I was working with people in D.C. speaking about back in 2015, that they are light years ahead of that in their capabilities, Deborah, and that's concerning.
Well, absolutely. And also the Aquarius operation briefings talks about how they would be able to create assassins through mind control. And the briefing discusses Lee Harvey Oswald and the Kennedy assassination as well. So again, I talked about that a bit ago. It's called the Aquarius Group Operation Briefing, and it is the planned chemical sedation of the population using radio microwave frequencies for mass mind control. And again, it talks about how that they would use a repetitive frequency pattern over a period of many years in order to increase the callous disregard for human life by others who reside in high population density zones. So that's very, very important because much of this technology is being deployed in the high population density zones. Hence the reason the required movement out of rural country areas into dense city zones so that you can be subdued by frequencies. They go especially targeted at large urban city areas where street gangs are prevalent. In the overall scenario of senselessness and unprovoked killings increasing as time passes. In other words, senseless and unprovoked killing as time passes. We're seeing that. The Aquarius operation feels they will eventually condition the public to welcome the eventual confiscation of firearms. And Steve, that's just what you said that one of the goals was. And setting of curfews, mandatory barcode IDs, which will be under the skin and inserted in general areas, and martial law. So this is all in this document. We have been told, but we did not know. We would look at these documents. I know I did when I first saw these documents. It just sounded too outrageous to be true.
Yes.
But then as we kept digging, we found it was true. So Steve, I'm going to go over a little bit of that application of Tesla's technology in today's world. And again, all of you will be able to find that under the resource document tab of stopthecrime.net. And again, it will be entitled The Application of Tesla's Technology in Today's World. And I hope that we'll have that up there in a day or so. But what I can do, Steve, is I can put the link in the description when you forward me the show this evening, which I will post on stopthecrime.net on our YouTube video channel.
I will do that.
So I wanted to discuss this because it talks about how from 1899, this is the year 1899 to 1900, and it's about how Tesla stayed in Colorado Springs where he made one of his most important discoveries, and this was the ground-based stationary waves. And he proved that the Earth could be used as a conductor and would be as responsive as a tuning fork to electrical vibrations of certain pitches. He also lit, many of you have heard this, he lighted up 200 lamps without wires from a distance of 25 miles away and created man-made lightning, which lightning is now man-made, producing flashes measuring 135 feet in length. And he said that we will have smoke annihilators. These were the ways in which he was hoping some of this technology could be used. And this is not how it was used. It has been used, sadly, to reduce the population. And I'll throw this in at this moment. That is why all of you should take very seriously any and all recommendations to reduce the frequencies in your environment. But the document, the Deagle.com document that I talk about, is planning to reduce the population in the United States and in other industrialized areas in the world. But in the United States, 84 to 85% by the year 2025. The main couple of reasons that they state that the reductions will occur will be through suicide and forced relocations. And that would be with people potentially being forced to relocate, and it's just too traumatic emotionally. But we know that it is going to be increased frequencies. So he talks about how they would have smoke annihilators, dust absorbers, sterilizers of water, air, and food and clothing, and it will become next to impossible to contract disease germs. He goes on, if we use fuel to get our power, we're living on a capital and exhausting it rapidly. This method of using fuel is wantonly wasteful and will have to be stopped in the interest of coming generations. The inevitable conclusion is that water power is by far our most valuable resource. This is Tesla saying this. On this, humanity must build its hopes for the future. With its full deployment and a perfect system of wireless transmission of the energy to any distances, man will be able to solve all the problems of material existence. Distance, which is the chief to human progress, and will be completely annihilated in thought, word, and action. They say humanity will be united, wars will be made impossible, and peace will reign supreme. So we're literally with the sounds of silence that was used in not Vietnam, but in Iraq. And also, Steve, you mentioned the use of frequencies. There's another case, not only with Cuba using the sonic beams on the Cuban embassy, that has now caused some permanent brain effects on many of these employees. But also in the mid-90s in Central Africa, in Rwanda, the Hutu and Tutsis were warring tribes, and the CIA went in there and said, well, we want to help you resolve your conflict. And so they had the tribal leaders meet one day, mid-1990s, and they blew up the leaders on that day, Steve. And both tribes were just irate. And what was occurring on a tarmac near the area where the leaders were blown up was a Hercules C-130 plane that was outfitted with microwaves. They flew over the Hutu tribe and exacerbated their anger. In other words, they were already angry, but they exacerbated it. This is extremely important to understand that this is how psychotronics works. It exacerbates existing anger. The Hutus became absolutely ballistic, and they used hatchets and machetes and killed about 1 million Africans in their rage. Now, you were mentioning to me you knew somebody that was in that vicinity at that time. Is that right, Steve?
I did, Deborah, and this is what's interesting because it was a friend of mine, and he was a missionary. And what transpired, he got very, very sick, extremely sick while there, and he actually went against the minister that he was under at the time, who had told him, do not go across Rwanda over this area, because he knew that they were in a tribal war there. And the only way for him to get home, to get to an airport back to the States, was, either to wait until someone could bring him out a safe way, or to make that trek across there. But he had gotten so delirious from this illness, which I have wondered after you have said these things here, Deborah, because he went against the senior pastor at the time, who had told him not to do it, which I could not even believe he would have done that, but he did it anyway, and he did make that trek. And he nearly lost his life on 3 occasions across that region there, but it was only, no doubt by the mercy of God, he actually made it. But knowing now what was going on, it might explain even the illness that he was going through that was so exacerbated, or even the fact that he was willing to go against the very pastor that was over the church that oversaw his missionary trip there. So that's interesting to me.
Well, it is. And of course, that event is now a movie called Hotel Rwanda. So for those of you that were not familiar with what happened in Africa and what the United States, and I don't know who else was involved. I understand the CIA was culpable in this situation. But now getting back to this document, the application of Tesla's technology in today's world, I'm looking at page 6, and it talks about what the Soviet Union is doing in high-powered, pulsed, low-frequency electromagnetic standing waves. And I'm going to go over it a little bit in my recollection of scanning this prior to talking with you this evening, Steve. But some of the things I read in this document is the idea that there's a standing wave of fog along the coastline that is literally forcing the change in weather. And I'll hopefully be able to find that. But as soon as I have this up, all of you that are listening, I would highly recommend that you understand that the weather is controlled. And sadly, so are many minds, people's minds. We're going to have to become much more tolerant, much more aware of people that are being attacked, because when I've interviewed so many targeted individuals over the years and have asked them, what can we do for you? Those of us that aren't recognizing that we're targeted, when sadly most people are and they just don't see it, but what could we do for you? And I've been told repeatedly, believe us. So I'm going to be asking all of you to believe what you're hearing and absorb what you're hearing and take action. Empower yourself with many of the recommendations that you're hearing on the program this evening with Steve and I. But again, on page 6 of this document, what the Soviet Union is doing in high-powered, pulsed, low-frequency electromagnetic standing waves. And they say in the document, on October 14th of 1976, radio communications all over the world were disrupted by powerful radio waves emanating out of the Soviet Union. Numerous official radio monitoring stations scattered throughout the world registered specific details on this occasion. Subsequently, these signals reappeared sometimes a very low frequency. Those would be the ULF, ultra low frequencies, and sometimes very high frequencies, and at irregular intervals for irregular lengths of time. They go on to tell us that they were looking at what the Russians had been producing, and their very high-powered pulse, low-frequency electromagnetic standing waves, and the meteorological reports coming in to the National Center of Atmospheric Research in Boulder, Colorado, showed that the blocking mechanisms, that's the fog banks and the frequency banks, was in effect along the west coast of North America. Another was located on the east coast, and a third was located in Europe, running north and south along the Polish-Russian border, extending up into Finland and down into Romania. These blocking mechanisms, sometimes they said occurred naturally, but they never last very long. These three mechanisms lasted an unusual length of time, too long to be considered due to natural causes. And at the time, there was no explanation or rationale for anything otherwise. Now, I'm just scanning through this document. I'm not going to be going over it thoroughly, but they talk about the standing waves with which the cloud bank off the Pacific coast was associated, persisted throughout December and into the new year. Now, remember, this document was produced in January of 1978, so I'm not sure the time frame that they speak of right here, but it was a cloud bank off the Pacific coast, and it persisted through December into the new year. It appeared to be preventing the normal circulation of weather from the east to the west, or from the west to the east, at least across North America. And on the Pacific side of the blockade, the weather had been unusually dry, while the land side had experienced a record precipitation. With the normal circulation of the atmosphere blocked, the vortex has wandered further south than is normal at that time of the year and appears to be controlling North America's weather. They go on to tell us that there have been a series of mysterious high-altitude explosions also along the United States Atlantic seaboard. 2 occurred on December 2nd and 5 on December 15th and 2 on December 20th and 1 on December 22nd. And in a few cases, these were accompanied by flashes of bright light, but there appears to be some uncertainty into the observations as to whether the light flashes coincided with sounds that were heard. They go on to tell us that the Office of Science and Technology in the United States government concerned as to the cause of the nature of these explosions. They go on to talk about how President Carter called for a full report, and then this is what was said in the New York Times. The following is an excerpt from the report in the New York Times dated December 23rd of 1977. 3 weeks of mysterious blasts along the eastern seaboard have left scientists to explore a number of explanations, but all they seem to agree on is that the blasts are strong and atmospheric, originating tens of miles offshore. The latest booms were heard yesterday morning off the Carolinas and Wednesday night off of the New Jersey coast. The Pentagon, in fact, denied any knowledge of the blasts apart from press reports and said it had no explanation for them. Now, let's be very clear. All branches of the government do not acknowledge weather control. It's unacknowledged. Also is the enormous effects of mind control frequencies that we are now all being confronted with. It is unacknowledged. And for the millions of people that are directly targeted, and for all of you that are soon to be targeted, these events are unacknowledged. And you will not find them in your newspapers or your magazines. You will not find this information. So they go on page 13 of this document, electromagnetic fields and the human brain. They talk about among the 150 different applications outlined by Nikola Tesla were the worldwide transmission of speech, the worldwide transmission of telegraph, the transmission of electrical power over great distances, the generation of death rays, the generation of a curtain of charged particles, the ability to modify weather patterns, the generation of isolated electrical plasma, fireballs, and man-made lightning. Goes on to say for more than 40 years, reports have been written, experiments have been conducted, and observations recorded on the effects of electrical fields upon the mental faculties of the human beings, as well as strong pulsating and saturation of electrical fields pulsating within the frequency range of alpha and or beta rhythms of the human brain can interfere with the psychological functioning of the mind and produce devastating psychological effects in most people. Most people. Now think about Big Pharma and the benefits of these hidden attacks on us. Think about all the psychiatrists and the pharmaceuticals and the psych drugs that are being used on people that are actually being hit with frequencies. Just think about that. Based on these observations in this report, they're saying that there has been considerable serious investigation of the use of powerful radio transmissions as a mass psychological weapon in the arsenal of modern warfare. A Pentagon Defense Intelligence Agency classified report parts of which have been released into the public domain states that Soviet researchers have found that people exposed to low-level microwave radiation experience more neurological and cardiovascular and hemodynamic disturbances than do their unexposed counterparts. Now, Steve, I could go on and on. This is a document that, of course, was put before us in January of 1978. I've gone over a number of documents. You and I have discussed what we know has happened worldwide with frequencies. You and I have also discussed what is happening worldwide with weather events. Now let's talk about the goals of mass forced population relocations as a result of the weather events that we're facing and the blackouts. And I've covered, again, I said earlier in the show, Steve, that Yana and I covered what will be happening with the blackouts. I just want to not scare people. This is not to create fear. It's just to create an understanding of reality.
That's right.
We have a lot of brains here that are listening right now. We can come up with ways in which we can potentially shield ourselves from this. But those brains won't be able to be utilized if they don't understand we have this need. Wouldn't you agree?
I do agree. And one thing, Deborah, that I'm actually working on in the background that I haven't spoken about publicly yet is Israel getting ready to release their Messiah figure. And I actually have a quote directly from their Messiah figure that talks about that they are moving towards a new era of technology, and he actually says an entire kingdom, which is the third house of the kingdom of Israel. That's scary in itself, Deborah, especially knowing that they're using technology to destroy lives and everything else that you could possibly imagine. Technology is the most wicked and evil thing that you could have, and yet Israel is about to reveal their Messiah. I even know who it is already. And that's a direct quote written in one of his own documents.
So have you released who that person is, or shall you discuss that on another program?
I have not released who it is, but I will say this much on this program here because I'm still working on some of the details because I have to translate the Hebrew on all of this. But he is a former elite naval officer. I knew he was a former commander in the Israeli military, but I did not know that he was in the Israeli Navy. And it's going to be very interesting because he's not someone that anyone would know. And he is expected to be, from what I have been told already, he is expected to be released. It's going to be released in a documentary in Israel. Israelis don't even know about this yet, but they're going to release a documentary about this man. And I know that he's been meeting with rabbis They have been vetting him, so to speak, to make sure that he is who he claims to be. But there was something that happened to him. All I can say is that something happened to him that caused him to become like super-brained person. But you know, Deborah, I know that there's, from some of the inside intel I know in Israel, they've spoke about how that they're trying to merge AI with human beings. So I don't know if he was part of that experiment or not. That's just speculative. I have no idea.
Well, that's interesting because we know about super soldiers, we know about the deep underground bases and all of the types of experimenting that are not only happening underground, but certainly I know of ships that are in international waters that are experimenting on human beings for literally mixing blood with humans and animals and embryos, etc. In fact, for many of you that are listening, if you have not watched this YouTube, I would recommend it. I saw this years ago, but it does show the extreme strength that can occur when there has been government intervention with human bodies. And that YouTube is called Madness in the Fast Lane. Madness in the Fast Lane. And this was a while ago. It happened in the United Kingdom on a motorway, which of course would be our freeways, our highways. And there were two young women that were caught on video cam walking in the roadway during heavy traffic that were not to have been there. And you will watch what happens when they are when the police are trying to get them off the motorway. It is unbelievable. Again, madness in the fast lane. I want to talk about this too because there are many people that sadly believe that they can relocate, they can run and hide, they won't be spotted, but we have surveillance all over the world through satellites, and certainly surveillance over America is ongoing and it's covert. And I recently discovered that a three-letter alphabet agency, starting with an F, and has a middle letter of a B and the ending letter of an I, conducted aerial surveillance of Black Lives Matter protests in D.C., where they tracked and monitored and traced and targeted people. And why I thought this information was outrageous is you're going to hear about it right now. Because these technologies, and many of you know, are being used for crowd control, and we are the crowd. And history repeats itself because I mentioned earlier the sounds of silence and also the voice of God operations and many other operations of mind control that were used in the Iraq War. We know that the voice of God operations, when we saw our troops going in to Iraq, to Iraq, we were seeing white flags going up in the trenches of the Iraqi soldiers that we were told were very hardened and that they would be a formidable foe for us. But they were, certainly surrendering immediately. Well, we were beaming them with microwaves. And as I'm understanding, our tanks went over and just literally buried them in the trenches that they had dug into. But beyond that, I talked about Operation Crimson Mist, and that was the covert secret mind-controlling attack over Central Africa in the mid-'90s. But also, attacks have been ongoing in the United States and in other nations and worldwide, and there are millions of people that are targeted, and we are the enemy. And what this document reveals is how there was a very advanced spy plane to watch various Black Lives Matter protests and other protests. And they discussed how this aircraft, how it was normally used to provide surveillance for big federal drug and gang busts, but it flew over the Black Lives Matter protest in D.C. earlier this month, and as well as over the Baltimore during the protest following Freddie Gray's death. And on Monday, June 1st of 2020, just hours after the federal police used tear gas and batons to clear protesters from in front of the White House for President Trump's religious photo op, a Cessna Citation, this is what it's called. It's a Cessna. It's a plane. It's called Cessna Citation Jet, took off from a regional airport in Virginia, and it flew a 7-mile circle above central Washington, D.C., surveilling the protest, flight tracking records show. And they talk about how the aircraft is a spy plane operated by that 3-letter alphabet agency, fitted with sophisticated cameras for long-range, persistent video surveillance day or night. And it's repeated its late-night circling around the city as protesters continued the following 2 nights. And they go on to say the notion of a First Amendment is an illusion. Obviously, this reporter that discussed this, it's from BuzzFeed News, must report on our reality. That's my throwing this in because he talks about how it's a violation of our First Amendment rights. So I just threw that in. But normally, this elite spy plane is deployed for some of the FBI's most important surveillance missions, providing eyes in the sky when federal agents arrest drug traffickers or violent gang members. But this isn't the first time that this has been flown over protests, goes on to say BuzzFeed. But they go on to say the FBI has a fleet, the 3-letter agency, has a fleet of more than 120 surveillance aircraft covertly registered to fictitious companies. And in 2006, BuzzFeed News analyzed more than 4 months of flights by these planes. And they used the planes to follow terrorists, spies, and serious criminals. But what I found was they're fitted with video cameras, and on the firm's website they talk about that. And the plane now carries a Wescam, WESCAM, MX-20 steerable camera turret, described by the manufacturer as ideal for high-altitude persistent surveillance. It can monitor targets day and night, see through the haze, and provide infrared thermal imaging. And the planes also not only carry the cameras, but they fly at altitudes at about 5,000 feet so that they can't be spotted easily from the ground. But it's deployed across our entire country, and it often circles targets at altitudes of 15,000 feet or more. And during the flights above Washington, D.C. in early June, it flew between 13,000 and 17,500 feet. But they're using, and I found this to be very interesting, about how our cell phones are being used by this type of overhead aerial surveillance and tracking. But it says that, let's see if I can find this quickly. It talks about how the Cessna Citation's identity was masked on public flight tracking websites, but from the Flight Trader 24 data, BuzzFeed News had been able to confirm that the same plane that flew over the Black Lives Matter protest in D.C. in June following the George Floyd's death, which is kind of questionable, also conducted surveillance in Baltimore after Freddie Gray was killed. But they're using our cell phones, and they can track and monitor individuals from these spy planes. So it's very important to understand how your cell phones are being used. And for many of you, your cell phones are tracking you in large groups if you go into the market or wherever you may be. And should someone be identified as having COVID, you will be tracked, traced, and caught up with, and be forced to have whatever a COVID requirement is available at that time, be it a test or be it the vaccination, which we're being promised by warp speed to have the vaccinations available by the end of the year, so they're saying. But there's much objection to that. There seems to be a lot of debate between the CDC and the WHO and the position that our country's taking with the accessibility of this poisonous, potentially deadly dehumanizing vaccination. But having said that, Steve, as I said earlier as we started the show, we're still in a active fire zone right now. We have had toxic smoke now for a couple of months because we've had continued fires. We're only midway through the fire season. And for those of you right now that are staring down these horrible hurricanes that are coming down upon you, just understand these are all part of the weapons systems. Also understand that not only are they using technologies overhead, as Steve was saying, there are technologies 100 years in advance of our ability to even know what they have capabilities of. But there are technologies that are being used in the ocean to create storm surge. One of the ways in which they back up the rivers that would otherwise, during a storm, be able to exit into the oceans, but they're able to back up the rivers and cause massive flooding. So I'm reading in the climate action plans that some of the main causes besides weaponized bio-warfare with germs and insects, there will be flooding, there will be earthquakes, there will be climate change activities that they're calling climate change. So for all of you that don't understand climate change, I would say, we're not climate deniers. We know that there's enormous changes in the weather and the climate has changed enormously. What we have is not climate deniers. We have weather weapon deniers. And a country, the country that you're in, that you believe you might be voting for change, that would use non-explosive warfare, that would use cyber in the large, use your media to disinform you, use microwaves and chemicals and biologicals and micro-mechanical warfare and other sensors on insects as sensors platforms. I mean, we're talking about what we know, the mosquitoes, and we know that the ticks cause Lyme disease. This is all weaponized. But they're going to utilize animals and even urban rats and insects as delivery systems and munitions, feeding and swarming and biting and poisoning. So we have to understand that dams will be used as a weapon. So if you're nearby a reservoir, you don't want to be down flow of a reservoir. People think they're by lakes, but you need to make sure that it is not a reservoir. Sadly, many lakes are just called a lake, but they're actually a reservoir. So when I look at the NASA war document and I look at where we are heading, because they say the future order by multitude increase in overall weapon effectiveness and availability at orders of magnitude. They talk about microwave and nanodust and smart dust and bioweaponry. They talk about cyber and artificial life beyond AI. Beyond AI. So, Steve, I would like to probably wrap it up now.
When you think of the future, you likely envision the remarkable technologies that you've seen in comic books and films. You may begin to picture flying cars, trains driven by electromagnets, or household robots that will see to your every need. While modern scientists agree that many of these inventions are either unlikely or unnecessary, it may surprise you to learn what the future could actually hold. Imagine being able to share your thoughts with millions of people at once, simply by typing them on a keyboard and sending them through the air. Think of what life will be like when all of the many fixtures of an office, including a typewriter and an entire Rolodex, can fit within a device smaller than a loaf of bread. Consider the vacation plans you could make when a single trip on an aeroplane is all that's needed to visit anywhere on Earth. Yes, the future certainly looks bright, but it isn't without its darker sides. According to some predictions, obesity will likely run rampant, and political corruption will become so commonplace as to be accepted. People with nothing entertaining or informative to say will broadcast their demands for attention, and once beloved performers will become pushers of snake oil. Perhaps worst of all will be the emergence of a deadly and potentially devastating disease. Game over. Think of the last time that you contracted influenza. You were likely bedridden for days, having no appetite or desire to play games. Experts predict that by the year 2020, and by the year 2020, and by the year 2020, and by the year 2020, a new virus will rise, spreading from somewhere in Asia to the rest of the world. With international travel being available to even the most common citizen, a sickness which would have been contained in years past will quickly spread to all corners of the globe.
It is the world that has been pulled over your eyes to blind you from the truth. The truth.
I got a number.
That you are a slave.